Hello, my name's Parastalker and I'm an indie dev based in Manchester, England, working under the collective name All In. But this video isn't about me. It's about my ridiculous, galaxy-spanning, fictional sports game, Zoners, and the ongoing work I'm putting in to try and make this one of the most accessible, competitive party games around. It's important for me to stress that the following video is not for showboating the current accessibility features of the game. Instead, I want to use it as a fuel for valuable discussion, insight and feedback from players about what I may be doing right or wrong, and hopefully also be able to influence other developers to follow suit, or steer clear of my approach if I've royally screwed it up. So first, a quick introduction to the gameplay itself so you can have some context. As you might have surmised from the footage that's been playing in the background, Zoners is a 1 vs 1 sports action game where players pick one of a quirky cast of aliens and must try and use their various abilities to hit a ball into their opponent's goal. A bit like Pong meets Dragon Ball, if you will. There's obviously a bit more to it than that, but that's the gist of it, and that will serve our purposes for now. So it should be clear, this game is fast and frenetic, with a healthy dose of chaos, and that's just with the standard match settings. With this in mind, if I want the game to be approachable, not only to people of different skill levels, but also to people who might have one or more various physical disadvantages, it needs a lot of careful thought into how the different pieces interact and in what ways players can unobtrusively adjust those settings to make for a comfortable experience. Now, the design of the gameplay itself is always going to be a big factor when it comes to making an approachable game on a skill level front. This is undeniable, but we're not going to talk about that much today, outside of a few assist settings that we'll get to in a moment. So, here we are. What I've done in Zoners so far is to make a game-wide profile system. If you pick any mode, before you play you'll be presented with an opportunity to create, delete, customize or select a profile. These profiles will contain all the necessary settings to adjust the personal gameplay experience to suit you, and they are separate from any save data. So if two people are playing through the game together but have different requirements, they can easily create profiles to suit their specific needs rather than having to constantly change the global game settings. Additionally, I think it's really important to note that I'm trying to make all of these options available in the core menus whenever you select a profile, and not tucked away in a menu you can only access from the main menu. One issue I always had with the more recent Super Smash Bros. Profile system was you had a quick way to create a profile from the character select screen, but in order to actually adjust any of its settings, you had to back out all the way back to the main menu and go to the options section, and it was all tucked away in there. Back to Zoners, you can't currently access these options from the pause menu unfortunately, but I am planning on looking into this further down the line, so that if you've made various adjustments but you're not happy with them, rather than having to quit, you can just edit them there and then and make small adjustments, see if you prefer it. So enough waffle, let's look at what options we actually have in the game. When we pick the settings gear on a given profile, we see them broken down into 3 main categories. We have controls, assists and accessibility. We also have edit name, that's self-explanatory, and the accessibility itself is split down into 3 subcategories. Let's start with the controls first. So, here you have full button remapping. It's currently displaying the Xbox One icons, but the game will also recognise and change to the Switch Pro controllers icons as well, and of course I'll add the PlayStation buttons in the future. Beyond the mapping, we have a few additional settings. We have charge type, which can either be hold or tap. So by default you're on hold. When you hold the melee or projectile button you'll begin to charge that move, but by changing it to tap, you tap it once, you'll begin charging, and you tap it again and you'll release it. The hyper type, your hyper move is like your ultimate move, and normally you have to hold both of the triggers. You can obviously change which buttons these are, or you can change it to a double tap, so double tapping a single button will activate that move. We have sensitivity, which is the stick sensitivity. You can change this between high, low and medium. This will just sort of effectively change the dead zone for the sticks. This isn't only useful for people who struggle with certain fine stick motor movement, but it's also useful if you have a busted controller. And finally we have vibration, as I'm aware that not only is it just a nice option to have, but some players have struggled in the past with other games where vibration interrupts it causes them pain or various other things. Now onto the assists. These are optional settings that work a bit more like a helping hand, and I foresee that in a casual game setting, younger or less skilled players will use some of these as well, and not just those who have certain disabilities. So from the top we have auto move, which will automatically try and move your player towards the ball's path and not just towards it. We have auto melee, which will automatically melee the ball when it's within range. We have auto recover in zoners. If you get hit and you're stunned in a sort of stun state and then you hit into a wall, if you manage to press a certain button just in time before you hit the wall, you will do a quick recovery, or like a tech like in Smash Brothers, and this will automatically happen if you have this setting on. The melee aimer, it will take out some of the work for aiming your melees for you. So when you do your melee, you need to aim where you want to hit the ball within a certain angle radius, and with the melee aimer on, it will either try and bounce you off a wall that will make you go to an angle towards the goal, or it will clamp your range to the top and bottoms of the goal. It sort of depends on where you're pushing the stick, and this won't always work of course because of things like hazards and the opponent's projectiles, etc, etc, but it's a sort of useful little extra help for those who need it. And similarly with the projectile aimer, it will automatically lock onto either the opponent or the ball depending on which one's closer to the direction that you're pressing. And just a quick side note with the assists, because these are more like gameplay options, when you finish collecting a character in versus mode, and I will add these to the other modes too, you will be presented with the assist then. This just means that they're always there in a similar way to how you have certain assists in say Mario Kart games, like the auto driving sort of type stuff, and just sort of bakes it into the core gameplay experience. I think especially in a party setting where you might just have people jumping on without a profile, it was handy to have these there. Right, and now accessibility. So as I said before, these are split into 3 subcategories. In the camera setting, at the moment you only have screen shake and camera scroll. Screen shake will obviously just turn it off if you turn it off. I might end up changing this so that it's a bit more fine. It depends on if I update certain things about how the screen shake works, but basically I might change it so that you can change it between high and low and off. Camera scroll, when the ball moves along the x-axis to the left and right, when it approaches sort of the further ends of the court, the camera will scroll ever so slightly towards it. The gameplay field is always fully in view, but I've been informed that it can possibly make some players maybe motion sick. Not from personal experience or anyone actually having that experience with this game, but just in case, I put the setting in. Under the effects, we have highlight hazards. This will highlight projectiles and I believe certain environmental hazards, and with a sort of red target icon, a sort of universal one. I'll put some footage on screen now so you can see that. I might change how it's highlighted in the future, but just as a basic idea of how it works at the moment. This just will help draw attention to certain things if you struggle to see certain kinds of things under that kind of visual noise, as it were. And highlight playfield is very much not finished, but again I'll show you an example of how it's working in game. Object of this is to basically highlight the playfield itself, like where the center is, where the goals are, where the edges of the court is, and things like that. And this will just help those who really struggle with lots of visual noise or are quite visually impaired, be able to pick out the key elements. Hollow field glow. So behind the player characters in game, there's something I call the hollow field, and that's kind of just like a holographic grid field where various graphics and effects are displayed on it. Wherever the player characters are, they light it up slightly within their color. You can change basically the opacity of that, and as you can see I've got a little preview here. Now you're going to see in a minute when I do some other settings based on colors and stuff that the preview here will stack all the changes that you made up together on top of each other, so you can see sort of roughly the final outcome. And Again, with a hollow field, there are various graphics and UI elements displayed on it. So if you do a parry, it will say parry. If you do super, it says super, as well as various other things. You can change the amount of these. It's like basically full, low, and off. I might try and describe a bit more in some way in game how these are working, and I imagine that probably most people will want these on just because they are actually quite useful. However, the option's there, and as I've learned while doing all this accessibility stuff, more options is usually the way to go. And hit particles, fairly simple. When you hit the ball with one of the various moves, all these effects go off. It just reduces that the actual particles part that hang around and fly out, and just reduces visual noise again. Right, and for the final section is colours. So under colours, we have darkened backgrounds. So if you want to completely remove these, we basically have these amazing, brilliant backgrounds from this fantastic Brazilian artist, so I'm absolute treat to work with. However, I understand they're quite busy, and for some people, especially those with visual impairments, they might really struggle to see what's going on. So we have an option to basically darken the backgrounds, and you can obviously do that partly or make it a solid colour if you're really struggling. And beyond that, you can also change what the colour it is to. Darken to, that is. So as you can set it like that. Let me just turn that off for now so I can show you the other things. We have desaturate backgrounds. Fairly self-explanatory. The higher this is, the more desaturated the background is, but the actual player and the arena outlines will stay coloured, which hopefully should help them pop. I know contrast is the main thing to watch out for with things like that, but that's why you can also darken the background ever so slightly if you want to. Let me just turn that back down again. And this. Now, when you select a player, a character, so to speak, you can choose from some colours. At the moment there's only 2 options, but there will be more later down the line. These are colour palettes. And the main colour, which you can see there, so like he's yellow and he's red, for example, or if I go on him, like a sort of light blue or a lime green, is that colour is used for some UI elements and for certain effects, like the colours of their shots and stuff like that. Now I realise it's great to have all this visual diversity with all these different colours and all that, but I realise that some players might struggle with that, especially if they have colour blindness. So by fixing the colours, you can set them to be orange and blue with a certain luminosity that they will always look different from each other, which could be helpful. And there's the orange and blue there you can see. But by changing it to custom, you can also just set it to whatever you want them to be. Just maybe you have a specific issue with, let's say, red and blue, and you can just make sure that that's never going to come up. And similarly with the goals, you can do the same thing. The goals work in zones where they get progressively smaller until they get to a core. If you can keep hitting goals fast enough before these shields recharge, you will get more and more points before you finally score a zone break on the 3rd goal. And if you don't do it fast enough, they'll recharge. So they start off blue, and if you can change that, and then they would go to orange normally, and then you can change that, and then they go to a red at the end with the core there, and you can change that as well. And that works exactly the same way. You can have it predetermined, nice and quick and easy, probably work for everyone. Change it to a custom setting, or just have it by default, which is also the on option. So that's everything I have to share with you today. I do have further plans in place to improve what's there, some of which I've mentioned and others I haven't, like a dyslexic friendly font for example, but I welcome any and all feedback and suggestions, and I hope what I've already done is a good step in the right direction. Big thanks to the Disabled Gamers subreddit. I posted up a video to them about a month or so ago, and they really helped me ramp things up by giving me really good feedback, really helpful, really useful. And I'm probably going to be posting this video in there to see what they have to say. And thank you for watching. Have a great day, and with that, this is Parastalker of All In Indie signing out.